So, welcome to our session, which I have the honor to moderate with four fantastic people, and I don't know how to squash all of that in 50 minutes, to leave also some time for you to ask some questions, which are most of the time more interesting than mine. And we want to talk about what kind of technology we need to counteract authoritarianism or repression against media. And you might remember in the year 2000 when Bill Clinton told China that it is to control the internet is like to nail Jell-O to the wall. So Annie will tell us what Jell-O on the wall will look like in a while. And then later, President Bush, you might remember, said he wanted to fund the creation and spread of liberation technology. And we will hear from Galina Timchenko how this liberation technology beautifully works now. And so 25 years later, we noticed that internet unfortunately didn't convert societies to liberalism, and it rather undermines their power. And so as a JX Fund, where I am from, we support around 85 media who work in hybrid or exile situation. And I must say, almost none of those could work without technology. So technology plays a substantial, essential role in anything those media do, and probably anything you do as well, from security to distribution of content, to connecting to sources, to connecting to colleagues who are still on the ground. And the interesting thing, I think, is that there is not one playbook. So unfortunately, we cannot say, okay, this is what's happening, so that what happened in China, we cannot repeat in Russia or now in the US. So, but we do see that the regimes do talk to each other, and I think we can learn from each other. So this is also something we're going to try here today. And the other thing that we see is, I think, with this new geopolitical rivalry, technology plays a really important part in that, and the don't do evil part that we believed for a long time is not so true anymore. And we do see the question of ownership of technology becomes really apparent. We see that in China, that the own platforms have been built. We see that in Russia, the authorities are now trying to build their own platforms and moving the people there. And we see that the US government is using Signal as the most secure tool and not their own. So we have speakers here who can elaborate on all of these things. And I would like to start with Jakub, who is all the way on the left side of me. Jakub Parusinski, he is the director of the FIX, a media industry publication and research hub, and he is also an expert on media tech and product development and many other things. He's also the co-founder of the Kiev Independent, so he's not just talking about media development, but has done it. And maybe, Jakub, you can give us an insight about the different technology there is, what is important at the moment, where is need, and give us a broad overview of the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Penelope, and thank you to everyone for coming today. So just to introduce the topic of tech in media, I think first of all it's important to just give a sense of the scale and the complexity that we're talking about, right? So contrary to what you might still, unfortunately, sometimes hear in the cafes of Perugia, launching a media project is not just about setting up a website and getting somebody to fill it with content. It's actually a lot more complicated these days. And, we were looking into this recently, and, the average mid-sized media uses anywhere between sort of 20, 30, 40 different types of software as a subscription, SaaS, for everything from how do you edit the podcast, how do you turn text into voice, how do you, store your subscribers, how do you mail them correctly. And in terms of budgets, we're talking about 10, 15, 20% of your budget going towards tech expenses, right? And just to make this super clear, if you're not spending that money, or in some cases, getting it subsidized, there are solutions. If you're not spending money on the tech part of your media, you're wasting money on your journalists because you're not distributing the content as effectively as you could, right? Now, that's in the nice part of the world, right? And then you get to the not so nice part of the world where press freedom and repression is much more significant. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot about the details of that. But just to give you an overview of the additional complexity that you're dealing with. First of all, you have defense, right? The DDoS attacks, the hacking attempts and all of that. So just the security itself is a big thing. You have circumvention. How do your audiences in repressive countries reach your content? How do you get around the different blockages? You have tools that protect anonymity. You have tools that encrypt or provide secure messaging. And so all of a sudden you have this whole ecosystem of new tools that you need to just to run the basic operations, right? And so the question of, is the world, is there things that we can learn from each other? I mean, absolutely, because censorship is very different in China and Russia and Belarus, and well, I'm not the expert there, but I've seen enough to believe that it's very different. But you know what? The censors from different parts of the world, they meet up just like us. It's probably a little bit less fun, although the after parties might be a little bit wilder, and they exchange knowledge and they sell knowledge. And that is a global market that we are up against. And, there have been successes. There's even business models that have been successful around selling VPN. Media have done that. There's media that have gone into consultancy and developed product for other media. There are successes around the edges. But just to be really clear about what we're facing right now with the funding freeze, what is happening is the investments that were going, that small share of media funding that was going to developing technology is not going there. The cycle of developing the tools of next year and in 2 years' time and in 3 years' time are getting cut right now. And what that means is that the folks on the other side of the fence, they're having a great time now because they were outspending media 40 to 1. Now it's going to be 400 to 1. And what we're doing is we're making things for them easy. And I think the metric of success, while if you've run into me in Perugia, you know that I talk about media sustainability and money all the time. This is not a case of media sustainability. This is a case of not making things easy for the worst people in the world. And by cutting funding, we are doing exactly that. Just how I feel.
Thank you for this optimistic note, and we will move forward to more of the optimism to Annie Zhang, who is the founder and CEO of Matters Lab. Maybe you can better explain what you do there, decentralized Web3 social media platform. But she's also a journalist and a co-founder of Initium, another media. And maybe, Annie, you can tell us a little bit, how this whole situation in mainland China came about and how media reacted, but also what is your answer? What are your solutions that you are developed, and where do we stand now?
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm very impressed with the image you just mentioned, that people censors gathered regularly and have after meeting drinks, and I think that China is one of the best businessmen in that industry. Yeah, and in China, I think we realized very early on that the technology is far more powerful than on strengthening surveillance than helping people bypass censorship. So censorship has a long history in China, in books, in media, long before the internet ever arrived. So once the internet did arrive, censorship came almost hand in hand together. So the history of internet inside mainland China is basically the history of internet censorship. It's true that technology once carried a lot of hope for people. It was seen as a tool for liberation. Everyone was there before, a way to connect, to speak out, to break through old barriers. And for a time, it really was. But authoritarian systems, like we said just now, they are like ordinary people, and maybe they are better than ordinary people. They learn very, very fast. So they figured out how to use the same tools, and they turned them they turned them into something that serves their power instead. As people became more and more dependent on internet inside mainland China, they almost every move they take in their daily life are on the internet service platforms for communications, payment, travel, identity checks, maybe every move, every time you pay a small bit of money. And but the telecom providers are state-owned in China, and the major platforms, or all platforms, are state-controlled in China. So it essentially means that you are handing over everything to the state. This started earlier in China than almost anywhere else, but during the pandemic, the state forced everyone onto digital platforms. So as an individual, basically you have no choice. Without relying on the online services, you couldn't even function. You couldn't even take a bus. So since then, I think the censorship and the surveillance in China stopped being just the application layer in your life. It's became part of the infrastructure itself. So that's where we are now inside mainland China. So when we talk about how media and the technology can counter authoritarianism, I think there are basically maybe two main scenarios or two main strategies. The first is quite simple, is to confront it head on, to stay inside the system, but try to make it as costly and inefficient as possible. You know, censorship, like it's an industry, after all, it's very expensive. So authoritarian regimes are not always good at maintaining such a high-cost system for a long time. So people can find ways to encrypt their own messages, like using slangs, using emojis, meme, the invented characters, images, videos, anything that makes it harder and slower for censors to work. It's not about complicated tech, it's about creativity. The idea is quite simple. As long as your message gets out quickly and spreads before the system catches up, you have won a small battle, very small battle. This approach works best in the short term. So it's fast, accessible, and can cause real headaches for the censors. The second strategy is not to confront it directly at all, but to disappear in front of it, to make yourself invisible. It's like a magic, but there are two ways to do that in theory. One is to build an entirely new infrastructure, things like VPNs, like secure messaging apps, like decentralized publishing infrastructure, or anonymous payment systems, crypto money, or alternative identity networks, basically creating a parallel world where people can communicate freely without going through the system at all. It sounds ideal and it's technically possible. But the real challenge in this strategy isn't building the tech itself, it's how to scale it, it's how to persuade as much as ordinary people to adapt it. And even if I think the most challenging part in this strategy is even the system is decentralized, it's hard to catch, but the people behind it are not decentralized, they are real. So authoritarian regimes know that they can always pressure on individuals, the workers behind the system, like your family, your friends, your network, and still using this way to control you. We have already seen many cases happening to tech teams in China, especially with China's increasingly sophisticated methods of cross-border repression. So the other way to disappear is even more radical, but even more simple, just unplug. Stop relying on the digital infrastructure entirely, go offline, build local societies, local communities, real physical spaces, small social circles, no more than 150 people. It might seem like a retreat, but actually I think for some of the freest and most creative experiments in China are now happening in this kind of very small spaces, small towns, villages, forgotten cities. This path is slow and it's hard to measure. It's hard to see the results. But because it's invisible, it's also hard to crush. It's like in the World War II, it's like a guerrilla warfare. So small groups moving lightly and flexibly, too scattered to be wiped out all at once. And over time, it can plant seeds. It can nurture people, organizations, even ideas that might last for generations. If these small spaces can find ways to connect loosely with each other, and I think the scale they eventually reach may surprises us. Yeah, my own practice, I think, stay for different ways in the past 10 years. We can talk more later. Yeah. Yeah, this is the thing I want to say about China.
Thank you, Annie. So let's see if Russia gets this applause too. So where do we stand? Maybe we go back only 10 years and you say, you know, how you answered whatever came the way in the past 10 years.
Yeah, thank you. You know, we established Meduza 11 years ago, and since the very first day, we decided that we will play Catch Me If You Can game, or cat and mouse. So, and for the very first 7 or 8 years, it worked. We played this game because Kremlin and all these old guys inside Kremlin, they are bad students. They were not technologically driven. But these 10 years brings us to the point where the youngest generation could see the only social elevator to work for government, to work for technological governmental companies. So we get the new generation who is too much smarter, harder, and faster. I want to follow the thoughts of Jakub and all my colleagues and said that even 10 years ago, all major donors asked me, why, for God's sake, you need so much money spending on technological department? And we were one of the very first Russian media in exile, and we spent almost quarter of our budget to our technological department, our technological desk. And where we are now, I just try to explain the picture. This year, we survived the major DDoS attack in our history. It was 2 billion requests in 24 hours to our servers, 2 billion. And we survived. Then, every 10 minutes, the mirrors of our website and mobile application is closed and banned every 10 minutes. And we counted that such DDoS attack costs 300,000 euros one. And we survived this attack not once, but very regularly. It's a war of attrition. You know, they are trying to cut us off our resources. And unfortunately, I support the thought of Jakub that this cutting off donors' money, technologically or something, Kremlin is celebrating for sure. So the second one, but it's the governmental attack on our infrastructure. And the second, Russian government and Kremlin administration, they are working very hard on owning major social media, banning social media. You know, Facebook is an extremist organization inside Russia. So Instagram and all Meta products. YouTube is slowing down now and even banned. All major distribution channels are closed for us, or closing this time. They are closing for us. So the second part, first, attacks on our infrastructures. Second, we have to reach our audience inside Russia. So what we are doing, we unfortunately, could not count on big tech because, maybe I can sound very rude, but they are not human beings. They have two types of answers. Oh, we do whatever we could. Or, oh, maybe we didn't do whatever we could to do, but we will try. That's all. 10 years of conversations and negotiations with Google, Facebook, and et cetera, brought us to nothing. So we could count only on our own sources. What we are doing? Unfortunately, we were cutting off our audience from Facebook, from Instagram, more or less. Now they are cutting us off from YouTube audience. What we are doing? We developed a few major solutions. First, our silver bullet is our mobile application. It could, thanks God that we have a very strong technical department. It could bypass blocking and works perfectly well inside Russia. Then we use Telegram still, and we are publishing what we call magic link. If you, because Meduza is labeled as undesirable organization, and any link to us could bring you to prison. So we called magic link. When you click on this link, you have your unique URL. And we put mirrors of Meduza on, so what we called public links. It's a shortener of URLs, standard URLs. We use mobile application, we use public links, we use magic links, even PDF works. For example, we made special, very great design, because PDF is very ugly, special design for PDF, and we ask our readers to print it and to give it to their relatives, to their seniors, to those people who are very much afraid of using technologies. We could not, unfortunately, reveal all these sources, but what can I say? We can count on ourselves only and on our readers, and to enlighten them, to try to explain what is safe and what is not safe, and try to build communities. That's all. Unfortunately, we are now in the position like a siege. They besieged us. Sorry.
Some more optimistic vision. So Udbhav Tiwari, who is the Vice President of Strategy and Global Affairs at Signal, not based in the US, which is good, and worked prior to Signal at Mozilla and Google. And maybe, so Signal is banned in China, but it still works in Russia, I think. I think there are continuous efforts, I'm reading, in various European countries to force you to hand out data. And maybe you give us a little bit an overview how Signal works, what's the model behind it, how is it financed, how many users do you have, the whole idea behind it, why the US is using it, and elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure, thank you. So Signal as an organization is pretty unique in the technology space because it's a non-profit that's governed by a non-profit board rather than a publicly traded company or a company that wants to go public and is currently a startup. What that does is it makes the incentives within the organization more attuned to that of a non-profit rather than a for-profit entity that would make decisions based on engagement or monetization. And the reason that structure has been set up is because Signal fundamentally as a technology is the bedrock upon which most end-to-end encrypted communication takes place in the world today. WhatsApp, for example, uses the Signal protocol, and Signal is an open source application. And while we license the technology to certain platforms as well, the transparency in the claims we make about what the technology can do aren't claims that you have to just rely upon our word for. Whatever the client is, whether it's iOS, Android, or desktop, and whether it's services that you use on the server side, all of this code is available on GitHub. And every change that we make is also available on GitHub for people to see when it's being made on the software. And what that does is the claims that I'm about to make about Signal are claims that are verified by third-party experts and independent experts in a manner that leads to people being able to trust them rather than necessarily just take our word for it. The thing that sets Signals apart from many other messaging applications is its end-to-end encryption. And what that means is that many platforms encrypt when you send one-on-one messages, the content in a manner that only the entity that is sending it or receiving it can read that message. What that means is if, say, this panel is on the group and we are all on a Signal group talking to each other, when I send a message, that would mean that only the people on this group, which means only the devices of these people can read that message. And while this is something that a lot of other platforms do, what Signal does is it also encrypts a lot of the metadata, which is information about the message. So while WhatsApp encrypts, say, a photo that we may send each other, it does not encrypt the fact that we communicated. It does not encrypt the phone numbers that spoke to each other. It does not encrypt the groups you are a part of. It does not encrypt your profile name and your profile information. And all of these things are end-to-end encrypted on Signal, which is why if you go to signal.org/bigbrother, which is a website that we maintain, you will see the list of orders for data that we've received from different governments and the efforts we've gone through in code to unlock those requests so you can see what data Signal can actually share. And it's only 3 pieces of information: whether this phone number has a Signal account or not, when was this account created, and what was the last time this account connected to the Signal service. There is no other information that even if you were to compromise Signal and completely take over its servers that you would be able to find, because the technology is designed to not leak additional information. And that's what has led us to being the world's most widely used secure messaging platform that is truly secure, that doesn't share your metadata, and that has the benefits of that network effect where if you're a journalist joining Signal, the odds are that your source in the government probably already is on Signal. And that's because even governments within each other, when they communicate, utilize the same privacy and security properties that are a part of Signal in order to carry out secure communications. Now, both in the context of things that happened in the United States a couple of weeks ago, but also otherwise, there have been many questions that folks ask around what is it that really sets Signal apart? And I think it's very important to recognize and acknowledge that the only thing Signal as an application can guarantee you is that if you are on one end of a pipe and the entity you're communicating with is on the other end of the pipe, nobody in between that pipe will be able to read what or see what you are communicating with each other. Signal is not in a position to be able to make guarantees of using safe devices, practices that you should follow when you choose to operate messages in a particular way, spyware that might be installed on your phone from both governments as well as sometimes non-state actors, and other social engineering attacks like phishing. All of these are things that can compromise your device. And once your device is compromised, it's not just Signal, but very few other applications in the world can actually protect you from the safety of your device upon which you are communicating. So it's very important that applications like Signal are used alongside basic security best practices, as well as a very realistic understanding of what it can and cannot protect you against. There are very different threat models that different journalists, news organizations, and sources might have on what are the kinds of practices that should be followed, and it's those threat models that should determine what does or does not happen. Signal has been growing increasingly popular over the last couple of years. I would say since about early 2021, when WhatsApp changed its privacy policies, there was a big surge. And since then, it's kept growing as privacy becomes a more essential property. But what has ultimately happened is that it's this growing popularity that has also placed end-to-end encryption under a very harsh light. And that harsh light is the light where governments are attempting to use other excuses, whether it's sharing data for national security reasons, whether it's fighting child sexual abuse materials, in order to force encrypted application providers to change their technological practices. And what this does is it makes it look like security or encryption is a balance that you have to strike, or that privacy is not a fundamental right, but something that governments can impede upon when they want to. And that's something that Signal believes is not true. We believe that privacy is a fundamental right that should be equally available to everyone in the world, and that is the reason the application has the principles that it does. In a lot of the contexts that have taken place on this panel so far, you would see that there are many ways in which Signal could have been used as an application, but more often than not, it's also the ease of use of the application and the fact that it strives to be a consumer messaging application that works as reliably as it can and provides the benefits of end-to-end encryption without impacting your metadata that set us apart from the space and lead us to being used as widely as it is in the community.
So Deb, I have a follow-up question. Because it works so well, and I think all of us use it every day, is it possible to further develop it in a one-to-many application? That's the first question. And the second question connects to what Jakub said at the beginning is there any market for this kind of privacy? Like, because I have the feeling as one point, as if somebody owns the data, they have always an interest in marketing that personal data, right? So I think with every technology that we're dealing with, somebody owns the data and has a commercial interest in marketing that data and making money from it. So is there a way for Signal to scale in this way? And how will you survive?
Sure. So on the first piece, which is the questions around whether Signal will evolve into a one-to-many application platform, Signal is also quite cognizant of the fact that the scale at which information is shared also changes the responsibility that exists on how that information should be treated. And what that means is that it's one thing for there to be a group and for all of the conversations in that group to be end-to-end encrypted. But if I could set up a channel that had 10 million people on it and post a message there, and that was available around the world in an end-to-end encrypted format, that would probably mean that there are many other kinds of public speech that would become very, very hard to moderate. So if you had a social media platform that only ran on end-to-end encryption, then it would be very hard for people to be able to take down content, to be able to report content, to be able to ask for certain players to be banned from those social media platforms so they can't join again. All of these things are really hard to do with end-to-end encryption, and therefore Signal takes its responsibility of developing features in a responsible manner, not just in improving privacy and security, but also being careful of the scale at which the services we make available operate. Because what we don't want is a scenario where, like, as an example, Telegram as an application is used as widely as it is because it does not provide end-to-end encryption for one-to-one communication. Channels on Telegram and bots on Telegram, the content on that are available on the server of the Telegram service in order to provide the kinds of services that the application does. And many of those things are currently technologically impossible to do while maintaining end-to-end encryption. And people turn to Signal for end-to-end encryption, which is why we try to preserve that as much as possible. In terms of sustainability, Signal is entirely funded by donations currently. And what that means is that apart from some of the revenue we make from licensing the Signal protocol, including to players like WhatsApp, the way that we've accounted for the incentives that you mentioned of what happens if you collect data and you want to monetize it in order to survive is two things. One, we actually barely collect any data. Like I mentioned, the 3 pieces of data we have are if you have an account, when you created the account, and when you last connected. And we don't collect any other metadata so that it's not asked of us by law enforcement agencies, and if it is asked of us, our answer is we don't have it, not that we will refuse to share it with you, and that we believe is the only way to truly resist pressure. And ultimately, in terms of scalability, there have been many organizations that have approached us saying, do you want to make an enterprise version of Signal? Do you want to make a version of Signal that me as an organization or our organization can support because of how much we use it? And our response has always been, so far, we have focused on being a small messaging application because that has let us have a pure core focus and provide the one thing that we do really, really well. So the only way for now to support Signal is via donations. And we've been a little lucky so far in that we have become widely enough used that there is enough money coming in from donations that I wouldn't say things are rosy, but things aren't as dire as they could be in a world that didn't care about privacy as well. And in a world where privacy is increasingly become more and more important, the number of people on my Signal contact list that are now donating, and you get those badges if you donate to Signal, has increased radically in the last 6 to 7 months. We grew radically in the United States 2 weeks ago. There's a lot that's happened in Netherlands, Belgium, Italy. In all of the 3 markets I've mentioned, we've been the top free app in the last 3 months at some point, sometimes for a couple of weeks. And all of this is happening naturally. You know, we don't have a marketing team. We don't take out ads. The only word that spreads about Signal is the word of mouth. And that, alongside making sure that we give whatever donation, even if it's like just $5 a month or $2 a month, those recurring donations really add up and help us build services in a much more sustainable way.
So now we learned that Signal is not scalable to a social platform and we have less budget. So give us some optimism, Jakub. Where do we have to develop to and how do we make that possible?
So I do have some optimism, actually. It's not just pure doom and gloom. So there's a couple of things that I think are positives. One is that publishers themselves have taken the lead on developing solutions. And I think actually Meduza is one of the best in class in that sense of at least as I know, because it's the media space that I'm more familiar with. And developing solutions that can then be spread around and can inspire others and can be potentially sold. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe something that's not publicly to be discussed, but there is a certain level of expertise in the publishing space that I think did not exist even a few years ago. I think where we are today is very different from where we were, 4 or 5 years ago. And that makes sense, by the way. That makes a ton of sense. In the past, there have been attempts to try to get the big tech companies, the Googles, the Apples, whatever, Facebooks, to get involved in developing tech. I think especially this was a Google story, though. And the truth is that, a bunch of people, however smart, well-paid, and well-intentioned they are, who don't have experience in publishing and who are sitting far away in California, the products that they were developing were just not the right ones. They have not been used in practice, very little. They have developed a lot of products accidentally that have been exploited for the purposes of distributing content. I won't go into those in detail because some of them are still great solutions and you don't want to burn them. But the thing is, publishers know the pain points of their audiences better. They know what it means to distribute content. So the expertise is there in the right places. And the second reason to have some optimism is because the world is really complicated. And when you want to have control over society, and you need control over information to have control over society, you actually like simple models. When all the information is coming from a few sources, that's great. When you have a million complicated and weird and wonky social media and different channels, and you have to all of a sudden police everything, it's really difficult. And the folks who are censors, they're also not geniuses, right? They're often, the B students, right? Or the C or the D students. I don't want to insult anyone. I wasn't that great of a student in a lot of topics, but it's not the best of the best, right? And the world will actually get more complicated in the next, frankly, 12 months, because the transatlantic rift is going to create a lot of problems for American companies operating in Europe. And one of the answers will be that Europe will start to stand up its own social media, its own tech solutions. A lot of them will be faulty and full of holes that will be exploited by both sides, but it makes the world more complicated. And from a censorship perspective, I think that opens up gaps. I don't know, is that optimistic enough?
But maybe Galina can answer that. I mean, she has to use the faulty stuff and.
No, thank you for the bit of optimism. Unfortunately, I'm a pessimist. I always ready, you know. Maybe I told this story. Me and my co-founder, every 3-4 months, we are developing disaster scenarios. Because we have to know what next will kill us in 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 weeks, or something else. So I'm ready to die every minute, and I have special plan for this process. But for sure, the world is complicated, but we forget about the main value of our profession. Readers, they are not so complicated. They are scared to death because we have some examples where usual citizens reported about people around them in buses and public transport who had been reading Meduza. And they were fined, and they were prosecuted, and they were interrogated. So it's dangerous to read us. And if we have, on the one hand, the perspective to being sent to prison for reading our journalistic materials, and on the other, we have our loved ones, there is no text in the world that could cost somebody's freedom. You know, so we have to care about our readers, how to be, not just how to reach them, but how to make this connection safe for them, as safe as possible. I do not want to be the reason for somebody to be sent to prison. You know, I want my audience to read us and to be safe. So VPN in Russia, for example, is almost banned, you know, but it's strictly forbidden to advertise VPN or to spread VPN. We are an undesirable organization. Every link to Meduza could lead you to prison. So you have to share our content only with your loved ones or only with your very close friends. So what does it mean to us? We are on the one side of the river and our audience on the other side. We have to build the safe bridge to them. And with the help of big tech as well. For example, I said to Penelope, when I was in Google headquarters, for a minute I forgot that I'm in Google, and I said, Google is supporting Russian propaganda because your algorithms work for Russian propaganda as well. And it was a little bit non-politically correct, but at the same time, after this, some team from Google came to us and said, let us help you to build this bridge. And they were very much, and they helped. We use one of their methods of bypassing blocking, because we blocked in Russia, with the help of one of the Google departments. So big tech is useful, but it's my principle. Only the whole amount, the whole sum of activities could lead to something. We have no right to use just one method of solution. All the bunch of solutions could be used, and for sure, it's all for our readers. It's not for us. It's not because we are so good journalists or so. People. You know, our editor-in-chief, he invented this news save lives. It's for sure. When in Russia mobilization was declared and hundreds of thousands young men were sent to be killed or to kill, we published special instructions how to avoid this mobilization. And journalism and news save lives for sure. So we want to save lives not with publishing our instructions, but to be safe bridge for the news to our readers.
So Annie, maybe you give us your perspective. What kind of bridges are still there or can be built for the future in an even more regulated, impossible environment that you're working in? And then if anybody have questions, we'll open the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I think my practices are in two very different directions. One is like the very technology one. I started a project called Matters Lab, and we try to use. I rely on Signal very much every day, and Matters Lab trying to do similar thing on articles. So we try to use blockchain and a decentralized storage technology to make articles harder to censor. A simple example is when you publish an article on our platform or on our network, besides a regular URL, you can also get a IPFS, a decentralized node address. So each address could open the article independently. It's quite simple, but it can bypass censorship in some way. So I used to put great enthusiasm in these projects, but I faced the most challenges, just as I said, there are people behind the system. So although our colleagues and our teams are overseas, they are not in mainland China, but their families and their friends are threatened very seriously. So it's hard to maintain this, and if they ask us to delete any article in the system, we cannot do it because we didn't have the data. So it's easy to refuse this kind of request, but still we cannot protect our colleagues. So now we are still doing on Matters projects, and it still serves millions of people. But now for myself, my new direction is on the very traditional way, the bookstores. So the most traditional physical kind of space, we opened a network of bookstores in 4 cities in the past 3 years. So they are all collaborated with very local community. Like we opened in Taiwan, in The Hague, in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and also in Tokyo in Japan. So even after just 3 years, I think this kind of network of bookstores has shown me a quiet, enduring power of different paths. We didn't fight or running in the bookstore, and the space is very slow, but it's open to everyone. People don't need to be activists, but after a few books, conversations, you can see something changed and it stays. So I cannot see the destination of this path, but I can see during the process that everyone, I really think the future stays in somewhere. I never rely on big technologies after 5 years ago, yeah. And now I can see the future in the place where people can breathe, can take a breath, and people can listen to each other. And I can see the strength in this process of practice in daily lives in the bookstores, like or in this kind of small spaces. And I think this is at least the thing we can do to protect our community itself. And I do believe if we have some way to connect this kind of small spaces together and in some places, and it will make change.
Thank you, Annie. And I think some place to breathe is also planned by Meduza, but I think you present that tomorrow. I think there's one question back there. Yeah.
Thank you. Christophe Leclerc, founder of the Media You're Active and of Europe Media Lab in Brussels. Jakub said something about the transatlantic drift and the need for Europe to develop its own social media platforms. The EU has announced that it will spend 800 billion euros on weapons. How about spending just half a billion, on initiating such a process together with the private sector. Right now, the EU has opened a consultation on its budget priorities and on the democracy shield. What is your practical advice?
Okay, so I'm Polish. I have friends and family in Ukraine. Buy the weapons first. Please, buy the weapons first. Fine, buy the weapons first. Those are more important. But yes, absolutely. The $500 million later, totally supported.
There's one more question, just not finish up with buy the weapons first here. Please, second row.
I have one question for the Meduza. So I just wonder, like, do you still have team reporting on the ground? How do you communicate? Like, how do you communicate with the team on the ground? Like, how to keep them safe? And you mentioned like Google, how to use Google like to help like safe reach to your audiences. But meanwhile, can you introduce a bit more about how you are doing that to secure the safety of your readers?
There is two questions. I answer very quickly to the first one, and second we can discuss afterwards. For sure, we have reporters on the ground. They have very strict protocols, and I do not know their names, even me. There are very few people in the newsroom who knows them, and it's very complicated. And it's very complicated reporting, and we have our editor-in-chief here, and he will explain you all about reporting from the ground and how we use services to protect them digitally. Yeah.
So we are being kicked out. I'm sorry. 50 minutes I told you was too short. Thank you.